Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined today by BadgerBlitz.com publisher John McNamara. Did you get any sleep this weekend after what is one of the most busy junior days on record?
Yeah, it was a busy weekend, 2 days of it, which I can't remember having a 2-day of junior day event in the past. So a lot of kids on campus last 2 days, and a lot of kids that you want to try to catch up with to find out how those visits went and where Wisconsin kind of stacks up. So I think it was around 25 kids, and all of them are relatively high priority prospects for Wisconsin. But a big piece to that is their first junior day got wiped out, almost wiped out due to weather. They had only 4 of the 10 kids that they expected there. So we thought this one was going to be a little bit bigger, but it turned out to be probably bigger than expected.
Well, I'll start by asking you to fill in the blank. So the biggest storyline or most noteworthy thing to come out of this weekend is blank.
Yeah, we haven't seen a commitment yet. And, to go back to the previous junior day, Wisconsin hit on 3 of those 4 kids. They're most likely going to miss out on Owen Strebig, who will likely commit to Notre Dame in the next couple days here. So no commitments yet.
That's on the 8th, I want to say.
Yeah, on the 8th. And, Wisconsin's there, Notre Dame, Miami. But I think it's going to be Notre Dame, and that's been my future cast for quite some time. So, but to go 3 for 4 in a junior day is pretty impressive. So, going back to this past weekend, no commitments yet. But, some of the bigger things I think is, a guy like Torin Pettaway, who comes away with an offer, a kid from Middleton, who, we made a profile for him because I think he popped up on someone's campus, maybe last fall. But, his recruitment is really kind of taking off, and just a kid who's played 1 year of football. So, 6'5", 265 pounds. There's a lot of upside there. And obviously, Nebraska offered USC, Minnesota, and then Wisconsin comes through with an offer that was, pretty well expected going into the weekend. And I have a future cast in for him to land at Wisconsin. I think that's going to be, if things kind of move in the direction I expected to, a really nice piece on the defensive line. And, if that comes the next couple of days, or, if it has to go in the spring or even the summer, I do expect him to wind up at Wisconsin. So, there wasn't big time, huge breaking news. I think a lot of the things that we expected did kind of happen, but I think it's one of the bigger ones that comes to mind. And then Byron Louis, the Rivals 250 kid from Florida,
tailback.
Yeah, he had Wisconsin as top 10, and when he released that top 10, I didn't know how much of a player Wisconsin would actually be, but to get a kid to come up in February to visit with that kind of offer list where Alabama's there, Ohio State's there, Oregon, a handful of other schools. That speaks pretty well. I was able to catch up with him, and he's obviously dealt with the media quite a bit before. He didn't give you a whole lot, but I think his actions kind of speak that getting up there, I think Wisconsin's a legit contender. And he said, "Look, I want to come back up there in the spring or the summer as well. So if you get him there, in the summer, you're probably closer to that top 5 group." I'm not ready to say that Wisconsin's going to get him or that they lead or anything like that, but it's a very good sign that he was up here for the junior day on Saturday.
Yeah, they're definitely prioritizing American heritage as a school. You look at Xavier Lucas, you've got his teammate now, who's also one of those long cornerbacks that they're recruiting as well, Thomas. And I don't blame him, right? That's one of the best programs in the nation year in and year out. But you mentioned Pettaway, and another defensive lineman that you wrote about was Brad Fitzgibbon, who was the high school teammate of Jamel Howard, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it looks like he's making some inroads as being one of the higher priority kids on the defensive line that is much maligned defensive line recruiting, I think, or at least a lot of ink spilled on the message boards about defensive line recruiting. So he seems to be one of the priorities. How do you think that he, sort of fits into the bigger picture of both Wisconsin's board and how they project him?
Yeah, he kind of gave me a nice nugget when I talked to him of, in his conversations with Coach Scruggs, they kind of laid out what they were looking for in this class. And that's something I always kind of ask the kids, do they talk about how many linemen they want to take in this class? They talk about how many receivers, whatever position group it is. And, when I talked to Brad, he said they're looking for 4 linemen, 4 defensive linemen, 3 guys who are, versatile edge guys, I guess you would say, and, in that 3-3-5 or 3-4, however you want to look at that defense, and then a true nose guard. And, Brad is in the category of the, potentially being one of those 3 defensive ends who can move around a little bit. And that's something that he mentioned he was intrigued by is, he's played primarily inside. And obviously if you're 6'3" and 280 pounds, you're going to primarily play inside at the high school level, but they think he's got, the versatility to move around a little bit, play a few different techniques on the defensive line. And I think Wisconsin's done a really nice job in his recruitment. They had him on campus in the fall, so that relationship has been there. Scruggs came down just before the junior day and offered, and then, they got to spend a lot of time with him, obviously on Saturday. So, he didn't give me any indication of who was leading his recruitment, but, I know that he wants to stay home or stay closer to home. He mentioned that the first time we talked, and, he's mentioned academics, quite a bit when we've had those conversations as well. So Wisconsin makes a lot of sense. And like you talked about, Matt, Jamel Howard, who he played with, I guess, 2 seasons ago, was someone that obviously he looked up to at Marist High School. And he, in this first story I wrote about him, he was telling me that, Jamel, every time they had practice, he'd ask him to borrow gloves because he didn't have his gloves with him. And Brad kept on borrowing all these gloves to him. And then Jamel came back, when he took all his official visits and, I guess maybe unofficials, and he gave him all the gloves that he got from those officials. So I thought that was kind of a cool story and something that Brad shared with us. So, I think someone that certainly Wisconsin feels pretty good about, going into the, I guess now the spring as we look at spring camp practices and, getting guys up on campus again for visits just in a short time here.
Yeah. What of, sticking in the Chicagoland, Jahmare Washington earned a scholarship offer from Wisconsin, and our old friend Clint Cosgrove thinks this is a great offer. He thinks he's a Power 5 kid all day out of Morgan Park. And you had a nice little write-up about him. It looks like they like him at cornerback, but he's obviously a versatile athlete. How do you see his, Wisconsin was his second Power 5 offer, I think, after Iowa State. So how do you see his sort of recruitment playing out and sort of the future with him?
Yeah, Morgan Park's an interesting place. If you talk to Clint, he's got stories about Morgan Park. Not that they're bad, but they've got a handful of kids every year, and they kind of take visits together and that kind of stuff. And obviously Wisconsin, he was a late addition because he wasn't on that initial list that we got. And then another thing about him, when he posted the offer from Wisconsin, I took a quick glance at the profile. And, we have him listed as a receiver, and Wisconsin is recruiting him to play cornerback. And I talked to him, he said defensive back is kind of my preference. And then, you dive a little bit into the tape, you certainly see what Wisconsin likes. And, 6'2", 170 pounds, that's kind of like what they like to recruit at cornerback, to have that size, potentially a boundary guy. I looked at the tape. I liked it. I think he's got high upside, and, Clint knows things 1,000 times better than I do. So if Clint signs off on him, I just automatically kind of fall in line as well.
So there are also some, current commits on campus. I know Michael Roski was there. How, did you hear anything from the guys who are currently there about sort of the vibe, or how just sort of what the atmosphere was like this weekend with all of these guys in town, going to the hockey game and the basketball game, and sort of what everything felt like on the ground?
Yeah, you mentioned, every kid that I've talked to, and we've had just quick texts back and forth with the guys who've committed. A guy like Landon Locke, we're going to catch up with. I know that you want to spend some time with, obviously, like his entire family, getting a chance to be up there with his brother. So we'll try to get him, early this week here. But, a lot of kids mention, not only the basketball game, which was kind of the headliner, right? Because, on Sunday, that's something that they typically do. But they also took advantage of, the hockey game on Saturday night with those Saturday visitors. And, maybe not the most popular sport for those guys on campus, but the reviews for that were really strong, and just kind of the energy of the Kohl Center, and, getting to see a rivalry matchup like, Wisconsin and Minnesota. So I think, obviously this weekend made a lot of sense for the staff to utilize, because, at first glance to see the Purdue game, that, that's a no doubter, but, when you bring it into 2 days, get them out to the Kohl Center and get them in front of, a bunch of hockey fans, and a program that's very much rejuvenated now. And I think they took advantage of that.
Yeah. Just between, seeing Instagram videos and stuff like that, talking to a couple people who were there, it sounds like the atmosphere was pretty incredible for the hockey game on Saturday night. So I think that that can't be a negative as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the visits. So what would you say sort of are the biggest question marks remaining, at least going forward through the spring before we get to official visit season in June?
Well, I guess something that I've just taken away, and I think it's, you could see it at Wisconsin, you can see it in just kind of college football now. You're seeing guys, in the last handful of cycles, a lot happens in the summer. Now you're seeing, Wisconsin's got 7 commitments already, and you can make a case for, a handful of guys that maybe want to get it done even before official. So, I guess that was something I was kind of thinking about over the last couple of days is, the accelerated timeline now. Are we going to see Wisconsin with, double-digit commitments before summer? I think that's really realistic to kind of see happen. So I think with the portal and, extended years of eligibility, I think if you know where you want to go, you got to make sure that you secure your spot. Now, that rule applies for everyone, but that, top 2% guys like Owen Strebik, right? I mean, Owen can commit wherever he wants on his own timetable, but for the bulk of these, Power 4 players, if you feel good about a spot and you feel good about a school, I think you really need to take advantage of that. And we've kind of seen that because, look, like we said, they have 7 right now, and that I guess I wish I would have had some data to back it up, but that's quite a bit for the start of February. And like I said, I think there's more guys that Wisconsin feels really good about that they could potentially close out before the end of the winter.
Yeah, that would be really something, and something that we haven't seen at Wisconsin in a very long time. So besides defensive line, everyone talks about the defensive line, what do you think is the biggest position in need here in 2025?
Yeah, you took my default answer away. You could probably see the defensive line for just about every class.
That's what I'm saying. It's right. Always defensive line, right? And we've gone over this ad nauseum. Defensive line athletes are really hard to find. So, yeah. and they're at a premium, and most of them are not located in the upper Midwest.
I would say receiver, right? Because you took one last year in Kai and Barry Johnson, and they've done an excellent job in the slot, right? I mean, you get Will Pauling through the transfer portal, and then you add Tretch Kekahuna, who came on late last year as a true freshman. Pauling, Kai and Barry Johnson, you think the ceiling's incredibly high for him. So
I love Vinny Anthony personally. I've always been a big Vinny Anthony guy.
Yeah, and he's kind of the guy now that you feel good about the slot, so you try Anthony out on the boundary a little bit, and he seems to have found a role there. He seems to certainly be someone who's going to be in the 2 deep, if not a starter this year. So, credit who is our coach, Elvis Whitted, for finding
Whitted,
for finding really a diamond in the rough in Kentucky, because he had just a handful of Power 4s, Power 5s, or whatever it was at the time. It wasn't that long ago, but I guess conferences have changed. So I think Wisconsin and with Kenny Guiton, what can he do on the recruiting front? I think they take 3, if not 4. Everyone wants to say they got to get a big boundary receiver. Well, those guys are tough to find. 6'2", 6'3", with legit wide receiver skills that can play at this level. I mean, those guys are difficult to find. So, like if you look at this weekend, the biggest receiver that they had was Quanell Farrakhan, who played this past season with Mabry Metoyer. So obviously there's a connection with there, but you look at his offer sheet, and he's got offers from some of the top programs in the country. Most recently, I think an offer came in from Alabama. So you see what type of recruitment Wisconsin's getting in there. But look, when I spoke briefly with them, and there's a legit desire to play with Mabry. Now, is that going to be able to beat some of the blue bloods in college football? I don't know, but that certainly gives Wisconsin a fighting chance here. And I'm looking forward to hopefully catching up with him in the next day or two to see how that visit was. Those guys are supposed to visit in the fall. That got canceled because their game got bumped to a Thursday or something.
Yeah, it got bumped back a day because of torrential rains.
Yeah. So then he obviously got his first chance there, and I'm assuming he bumped into Mabry because Mabry's on campus already. So that's certainly a good thing for Wisconsin. So I feel very good about their slot recruiting. They had a lot of slot guys on their recruiting board already, but can you get those boundary guys that are going to be kind of the next wave of talent there on the outside for Wisconsin at receiver?
So, last question. 3 new assistant coaches between Guyton, who you mentioned, AJ Blazek, and Alex Grinch. Early returns, early thoughts on how these guys are doing, at least recruiting wise, and how they're connecting to some of these 2025s that they're, a lot of cases just getting to know.
Yeah, the first guy that I'll mention is Blazek because, I guess give you a little bit behind the scenes here. Owen's a guy that Strebig, a guy that I've been talking to for a long time, since his freshman year, and he's a great kid, and he always kind of keeps me up to date. And when he took that junior day visit to Wisconsin, he's like, "Hey, we should do a story on this because I think Wisconsin fans would like to hear about primarily Blazek." And I think he's a big reason why Wisconsin was kind of on the outside looking in, but really made a significant push late. Now, going back, it doesn't really matter because I do think he winds up at Notre Dame, but the early returns on him have been very good. Strebig talked about him kind of at length about the energy that he brought and the unique approach that he brought. And then, they brought a guy like Matty Augustine in, I believe last week. He was kind of a quiet visitor. I think he just came by himself on a Friday. But that was someone that, visited, I think, no less than 2 times in the fall. And then obviously Blazek, continues that relationship with him there. I like the offers that he's put out there so far. Kids a little bit on the East Coast, and then they offer a kid from Iowa who the people that I've talked to in Iowa really like. So I think in terms of from those 3 who stands out right away, it's Blazek. We haven't seen so many offers from Kenny Guiton just yet, so it'll be interesting to see how his board kind of evolves. Does he go more off of the kind of established relationships that Wisconsin already has with receivers, or does he kind of go off his targets that he had at Arkansas? I think the Jaden Perez kid, he's a 4-star slot from Texas. He picked up the offer, but I can't really recall any offers off the top of my head that he sent out. And then Alex Grinch, I think his job is more retention than it is addition in the 2025 class, right? You have Cody Haddad and then Jahmare Scott, 2 kids who committed, during that time period where Hitchell was leaving. So, Wisconsin absolutely wants to hang on to them. And, you've seen schools like Ohio State come after Haddad, who's an Ohio kid. So I'm not sure how that one's going to play out, but, those guys committed after Hitchell left. So you think they feel pretty good about where they stand with the Badgers and those relationships that they have with, Coach Fickle and his entire staff, and guys like Max and Pat. And I wrote about that too. Is you lose an assistant coach, it feels like a death blow sometimes. But the work that Max, Pat, and Casey are doing behind the scenes to bridge one assistant coach to the other, it's not like you're just falling face first with these guys, because their primary guys are usually Max or Pat. All these guys are talking. Just about every guy that they're recruiting, they're in contact with that recruiting staff, not just the assistant coach. And that's kind of different from past years, especially years when you went 8 months without a recruiting department. So that's a little bit different, but kind of a long-winded answer there. But, I think that, Blazek's done a nice job. I think we'll see more from the other 2. And, nothing is going to crumble because that recruiting department is really strong, and they know what they're doing.
Yeah. And Coach Fickle takes an active role, like a more of an active role than we've seen Wisconsin coaches past, right? I think Barry took a somewhat active role as sort of the closer. But, Fickle seems to be more involved early on. It seems like at least the quotes that you're pulling say like, yeah, and I got to spend time with Coach Fickle, right? And a lot of times we heard in the past, like they might see a position coach,
yeah,
on some of these visits. But this time it's like, even if, Coach Fickle said he was impressed with what, with my take, whatever comment. And I think that is sort of indicative. And also that relationship between Pat, Max, Casey, and Coach Fickle, like they are sort of a package deal, right? And so that your relationship, their primary point of contact is going to be Max or Pat or one of those guys, and sort of they know that they're not going anywhere, they're sticking with Fick. And so I think that for me, at least on the outside, that seems to be sort of the driving force behind a lot of these relationships.
Yeah, 100%. And Chris was there too, and I think he kind of really shined in those official visits where he got guys to the house. I think Chris was excellent at connecting with with parents and like the entire family. So I think, he got mentioned a bunch because he would always spend time with him, on that Sunday or that Saturday night of official visits. But I think you're seeing more kind of start to finish stuff with Fickle. So I definitely think you're definitely accurate there, Matt.
Awesome. Well, I will end the show then on me being accurate because it doesn't happen that often. So we will finish up here. It's been a minute since we've had a Badger Blitz TV. We'll be hopping back on that in a more frequent cadence here coming through the spring, especially with recruiting season, because let's face it, we all love recruiting information and we can never have enough of it. The best place for it, though, is BadgerBlitz.com, where John is the publisher, editor-in-chief, lead journalist, moderator extraordinaire on the boards, and many, many other things. So make sure to head on over to BadgerBlitz.com and sign up today if you are not already. Thank you for tuning in here on Badger Blitz TV. Make sure to like it, subscribe it, share it with your friends and enemies alike. And until next time, we will see you in the den.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, John.